The Honest Garage Podcast, where real shop owners tell real shop stories.
Today on the Honest Garage Podcast, we're talking with a third-generation shop owner who spent more than half a century in the industry and is still pushing himself and his team to stay on the leading edge. Steve Mancinelli is the owner of Mancinelli's Auto Repair Center in downtown Denver, Colorado, a family shop that's been operating from the same location since 1950 and is now one of the area's go-to specialists for European, Asian, domestic, hybrid, and full electric vehicles. Steve actually started down a completely different path, having considered going to medical school, training to be a doctor, before realizing he couldn't separate the emotion from the work with his patients. So he came back to the family business and poured that same heart into auto repair instead. Today, he's an ASE Master Tech, an accredited Master Automotive Manager, a former ASA board member, and the third generation steward of a shop that prides itself on problem solving the cars other places can't fix, especially late model, European, and electrified vehicles. What separates Mancinelli's is the way that they blend old school relationship service with very modern process, thorough digital inspections, factory level tooling, at least 60 hours of training per tech per year, concierge and shuttle options, and a culture built around genuinely treating customers like family. So much so that Steve literally tells people, if you don't get treated like family, ask for me personally. In this episode, we're going to dig into what really separates his shop from the pack, how he thinks about hiring and caring for the people at the front counter and in the bays, and what he's learned from 50 plus years in the business about what's changed and what absolutely has not. Steve, welcome to the Honest Garage Podcast. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, David. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Really excited for the conversation today. Tell me real quick before we jump in, what's a car trend that you're never going to understand, but that you see everywhere?
Specific trend, neglect. Yeah, a lot of neglect, and I think and neglect runs high and low with people, and it's all dependent on outside economic conditions, their own pocketbooks, etc. But they can't do without their automobile. But they really have a tough time sinking money into it. I'm making an overgeneralization probably because I do have a fair number of customers that really do take very good care of their vehicles. They just want to get as much time out of them as possible. It's not like it was back in the 70s where most people had a relationship with a car salesman, and every 3 years they'd go trade it and drive the next newest one off the lot. But back in those days, if a car made it 100,000 miles, you threw a party. Now everybody's expecting a minimum of 200,000, and we've had vehicles in here 300,000 plus. Things have come a long way, but the one thing that has remained the same is the people that refuse to put any money into their car and absolutely neglect them and then wonder why they have to get it towed in.
Yeah, I know that we saw that at my dad's shop when I was growing up as well. And you can't change human nature, it sounds like.
No, definitely not.
So, one of the things you touched on there was that gap of time with everything you've seen. And for those that don't know, I know you grew up sweeping floors, pumping gas in the family shop, and at one point, even detoured with the idea of going into medical school, stayed in this industry. When you look over all the time that's passed, what kept you in the family business and what kept you in the industry? And what does that legacy mean to you now at this point?
Growing up in it, as I was beginning to learn the basics, it really intrigued me. It's the problem solving. I'm a guy that likes to do puzzles and crosswords and be able to see something and take it to its conclusion from beginning to end. It's very gratifying. Going to school was great. I got one hell of an education and learned an awful lot, but there was a couple of factors. What I had explained to you about not wanting to have to deal with walking out of a room and telling anybody that I did the best I could and it wasn't good enough, and just closing the hood on a car and telling somebody it's time. There's nothing left to do for this particular model, you got to go out and consider another one. Um, Lots of things change here and there, but that's the main thing. Secondarily, after I had quit school, I had started working at an Oldsmobile Cadillac dealership in Tucson, Arizona, and my father had taken ill, and I took that as the opportunity to be able to tell him that I had quit school, which he was very disappointed in. But I knew that once I told him I quit school and I was working in a dealership, that he couldn't kick my behind. And he was very frank, and he told me on the phone, he says, if this is what you want to do, then you need to come back here because this is where all your contacts are at. And so I didn't disagree with that. That's what got me back here into the family business.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you made a lot of sense. It's hard to get into this industry when all your contacts and your entire network's in a completely different state. I know that from the outside, there's a lot of shops in Denver, a lot of them, and even some other good shops in Denver. But what I noticed consistently is that customers are always saying that they get something. The word that we saw in online reviews and stuff like that with you was they get something different at Mancinelli's. And I'm wondering what that might be. What are the two or three things that you really think separate your shop from other shops around the metro area?
Well, I think it's what I would consider personalized service. We truly all do know our customers by their first name and greet them when they walk in the door by their first name. We take a lot of extra time once we've completed a digital vehicle inspection and email or text it to the customer and allow them to review it. The main customer feedback on those inspections is how thorough and detailed the inspection report is, and then that we take the time to go over those things line item by line item, and then pause to ask if they have any questions. We'll probably spend 5 to 10 minutes longer on a telephone call, but I think it translates into a pretty decent average repair order, which makes the advisors happy and it makes the technicians happy. Certainly makes me happy. And the customer is okay with spending whatever amount of money it is. So in the end, it's a three-way win. It's a win for the customer, a win for the shop, and it's a win for the employees.
Yeah, and that's great. And taking that extra time in the education stage almost takes the pressure out of the sales process altogether.
Oh, yeah, I don't feel that I have to sell them anything. As a matter of fact, I've told a number of new customers that I could care less whether or not they spent a dime on their car, that my only job was to inform them, and the decision is ultimately theirs, whether or not they're going to spend the money on their car and keep it running or roll the dice and see when it stops running.
And you don't want to be
Yeah.
left in Colorado and Denver when it stops running in the middle of winter.
No, definitely not.
So I know you've seen all sorts of changes over the decades in the industry. You've been around to see everything from carburation all the way to electric vehicles and the ADAS and all of it. And that's just on the technician side, let alone like the
Right.
business side. For shop owners and GMs out there listening, what do you think some of the biggest shifts are that actually matter that have taken place over the time you've been in the industry? And what do you see as the future shifts or coming down the pipeline that you think are going to make the biggest impact?
I think when I look back on the early years, we wrote all of the customer requests on a Big Chief tablet next to their name, did the job, and then create an itemized receipt for them. Everything is computerized now, and we have to generate these state law driven repair orders and documents because everything's a legal document these days. But the in between was the advent of the service advisor. When I was much, much younger, we were the advisor, we were the technician, we were the estimator and seller from start to finish. And now you've got a liaison and a service advisor that didn't exist really until the 80s on a wholesale scale. I know that the dealerships were way ahead of the mark on that type of thing, but the independents caught up with them pretty quick. But having said that, I think down the line, and they're already starting to make the move towards artificial intelligence as an assistant for the service advisors, or I would even think at some point in time they may be able to replace them based on whatever it is that comes out in computing skill, etc. I don't know that you can ever replace a human being 100% because people like that personal interaction. And the one thing AI will never be able to do is listen to and understand emotion, emote itself. Everything would be very sanitized, for want of a better word. And that's not what people are looking for. In the service business, whether it's automotive, restaurant, bar, people want personal interaction. And the more you give them, the more they spend.
Yeah. I think that there's the old saying in business is that people do business with people that they know and trust. But I
Right.
think it's really easy for us to focus on that know and trust factor. But there's a really important part before that, and it's that people part. People do business with people. They
Yes.
do business with other human beings first, with their own emotions and their own experiences and baggage that they bring to the table. And I think that
Right.
it makes us all more relatable. And I personally think that AI has changed the way, obviously, that my industry works. It's changed a lot of things, and it's going to be probably as big of an invention as the internet as when it's finally in full swing. But I do think that there are going to be some bad habits that jump out of that that start to we go down the road thinking that we are going with the best of intention, but I think we're going to end up in the wrong places sometimes. And
For sure.
I'm curious to know from your perspective, what were some examples of that you saw with things in the past where what are some of those bad habits that are still clinging on with the way people used to do business? And what are some of the things that we probably should have avoided as an industry?
I think one of the biggest bad habits that shop owners really have are hiring service advisors with automotive background. Now, if you want to hire a general manager, certainly automotive background is going to be critical and crucial. But an advisor, I hire two things. I hire personality and accountability. Everything else is trainable. And I can get somebody out of hospitality or restaurant or anything along that lines and stick them in that chair as long as they are personally accountable and they've got a great personality. I can train them to do the job in a very brief period of time. And that's what separates the good ones from the ones that want to diagnose at the counter and then it doesn't cost anything. We're not into fast and free. Everybody needs to be paid for their time. The techs need to be paid for their time, determining what a problem is. The advisors need to be paid for their time for the amount of time it takes in terms of check-in, write-up, estimating, and check out. They're going to spend an average of about 45 minutes per customer. So, yeah, hiring service advisors with automotive background is a big no-no for me. And I think that's probably the biggest mistake that a lot of shop owners make. And there's quite the distinction between a service advisor and a service manager.
Yeah. I know we've talked with some people on this show who actually have gone so far as changing the titles from service advisor to like customer success representative or something like that so that it's less of an automotive draw in the job posting originally.
Yeah, I just changed business cards here in the last couple of weeks and I call them service consultants.
There you go. Yeah, so that's something unique for this show as well. We've got customer success representatives and service consultants. I think that the service advisor or service writer role in the industry has been really unique over the past 10 or 15 years with the adoption of some of the new technology, some of the new shop management tools, the DVIs, while still maintaining customer focus and customer relationships. And I'm curious how you feel like the service writer or the service advisor in particular, how they've been beneficial for the automotive industry at large.
They've got real world experience at the same level the customer does. When I tell you that I hire out of hospitality or restaurant or otherwise. So there's an automatic connection. Where those changes come in is with all of the latest and greatest in technology, and they have to take on some of that basic training with the technicians to know how systems operate so that they can relate it on a personal level to the customer instead of a technical level. And the way that most of that basic training comes across is very basic, and they are able to make that leap pretty easily.
That's great. So, shifting gears a little bit away from the service advisor and the AI conversation, I know that you've invested a ton of time in 20 groups, ASA leadership, management and sales training. You've been involved a lot in building a network around this industry. And for a lot of the shop owners who are listening to the show who might feel like they're still on that island, what is plugging into your professional network done for you and your business? And how did you start to build that professional network? And what advice would you have to shop owners who are feeling like they're stuck on an island by themselves right now?
I got started at building that network by getting on the Automotive Service Association Board of Directors for Colorado. And what morphed from there was one of the things that we were focused on for everybody here in Colorado was training, whether it was technical, business, or management. And in the process of lining up at the time, this was back in the early 90s, some of the best trainers around. We struck up a great relationship with Bob O'Connor, who started the RLO 20 groups out of Washington. And I think he started them in the late 80s, maybe been the early 90s. And so we had enough of us, and all of us were actually on the ASA board, that we started a brand new 20 group with Bob here in Denver. And those things, they have a shelf life. Bob was all about getting the group to its maximum, which is 20 guys. He'd start out with a minimum of 7. But what I found frustrating was, yeah, we started out with 7 and everybody's on the same page and we're all working towards the same goals. Then Bob would bring in 2 or 3 brand new people, and these people are neophytes. And you stop and you go, okay, come on, it's time to catch up. And we go through a lot of the same content that we had already gone through in months or years past. So after 3 years in that group, I left, and I was in the middle of a conversation with Bob about a year after I had left. He said, if I got you into a group that was full, would you be interested in coming back? And I said, absolutely, as long as everybody was just on the same page. And then I joined the Arizona-based group in the late 90s and did that through the early 2000s. And then Bob was still growing the number of groups that he was adding to his business. And because of that, he had to step away as facilitator in a certain number of groups and hire on other facilitators. The guy he hired on, I didn't care for. And so I dropped again. And then there was a lot of things that went on through the 2000s and into the early 20 teens on the personal side. And I had somebody here that I relied on pretty heavily that ran the business for me for quite a while. And they had left in 2015. And then all of a sudden it's me back in it. And I'm looking at the whole operation. I'm on the surface of the moon. This is all different. And then that's when I hit it and hit it really hard. I got back into an RLO 20 group just to get up to speed on all the latest and greatest in the industry. Started using a digital vehicle inspection instead of handwriting all that stuff. Changed the shop management program. Incorporated a lot of different KPIs that I never tracked before and really grew it, doubled it by doing that, doubled it all. Well, it took about 7 years to double it all, but I guess the biggest mistake I made was taking a half step back and letting it get past me. I haven't done that since. Yeah, I think if yeah, and I think if you're going to be an absentee owner, you have to be a multi-store owner. If you're going to be an owner of a singular shop, then you need to make sure that all of your business is done on a personalized level. You cannot apply a cookie cutter approach like they do with MSOs uh, and get the level of customer service that I know that we provide.
Yeah, it's really hard to create a system around individual customer service and around
Sure.
individual service riders. And I can see where that could be a real problem for single shop owners instead of multi shop owners. So, one of the things that we ask everybody on the show is what is the phrase honest mechanic or honest shop or honest shop owner? What does that mean to you personally? How does it show up in the way that you run the business on a day to day basis or the way that your team runs the business on a day to day basis?
I think we covered that a little bit. It's making sure the customer knows that our only job is to provide them information and we're not trying to push a sale. That you can talk integrity all day long, but you've got to prove it. And the only time you prove it is when things go haywire. And that's when you say, stuff happens. We took care of this however many years ago. It's still under warranty. It's not going to cost you a dime. We'll get it done for you as quickly as possible. And then it's a painless process for the customer. And some customers are very surprised when you've taken the time to go back in history to find out that you did that repair once before and it just didn't last as long as you thought it would. That's where the honesty factor is. It's how well you do with bad situations.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge that all of us face in this industry. Inevitably, vehicles are really complex. And whether you fix a problem and a part fails, or you fix a problem and it was a problem, but it wasn't the problem that the customer was bringing it in for. I think that trying to do the right thing by the customer at the end of the day is absolutely a staple that we hear pretty often on the show for that honesty side of things. So I think that's
Yeah,
awesome.
and I'm not of the belief that the customer is always right. Sometimes the customer is just an asshole, and there's nothing you can do about that. But operating the vast majority of time in knowing that car ownership is very emotional for everybody. You can tell just by the way they drive when you're in traffic. Who's having a bad day, who's not. It's relating to those emotions, showing compassion and understanding and doing the job right the first time.
Yeah, I swear this job is becoming like half therapy and then half automotive repair sometimes,
So
especially
more
on the
than
front end.
more than half, I'd say, is therapy. Yeah, because the cars are getting very sophisticated and they're doing a okay job of helping create a direction for the technician to determine a repair process. It's not like in the old days of early computerization where when the check engine light came on, you had no idea and no information, but the information is so vast and voluminous that you really have to be negligent to not be able to get it done right the first time.
Yeah, and I think training is so important in the industry to make sure. I think the more data points we're given, the harder it is to sift through all of the data to find the appropriate data. And I'm
Right.
wondering if you could mention real quick, like, you do that 60 hours of training per year per person. And I'm curious where you found to be good training sources and where other people might be able to find to get plugged in.
We found a lot of stuff during the COVID years because a lot of the training is done online. Gosh, Automotive Training Group, ATG is one. I'm trying to remember all the acronyms. WorldPack really puts out a lot of good training, whether it be webinars or in person. Of course, if you're in a 20 group, there's an awful lot of training available to you and a lot of different training resources. The gentleman that sold us the equipment that we use to service hybrid and electric vehicles has a lot of his own training, and it's a serious volume of webinars. We can really get stuck in a rabbit hole trying to finish them on. He's constantly putting out brand new stuff. So it's all out there. We spent the COVID years sitting on our butts waiting for a car to work on because everybody was locked down. We were essential employees, so we were open. So while we were open, we were refining all of our processes, refining the website, looking for training and those opportunities so that when things opened back up, we would be prepared and ready to hit the floor running. And it worked out well.
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice for people out there that are listening to the show. If we're in a situation where times are slow or where the world throws you a curveball, take a look at the opportunity for training and focus on the things that
Absolutely.
you can control instead of focusing on the problem from the outside that you have no control over. Because there will come a time when the ball's back in your court and it's time to play again.
Yep. 100%. I'm with you.
That's awesome. I just want to say thank you again to Steve for being here on the show today. Steve, before we officially wrap up, what's the best way for people to connect with you or learn more about Mancinelli's Auto Repair Center in Denver? And if they got value from the conversation, what's the best way for them to let you know?
You can go to our website, www.mancinellis.com. You could reach out to me personally at steve@mancinellis.com and email me. Those are the two best ways to contact.
That's great. I appreciate you sharing that information for people. And I think one of the cool things that we get to do here on the show is really build the community. And whether you get something as a newer shop owner from the entire conversation or you find individual nuggets in this conversation, I just want to make sure that you share the conversation, share the show with another shop owner or someone else in the industry. Subscribe so that you don't miss future episodes. Leave us a review for the show. It helps people find the show the same way that reviews help people find your shop. And if you want more resources and real world marketing advice, obviously you can reach out to us at honestmechanicmarketing.com. But other than that, thank you so much for listening. And as always, keep it honest in the garage.
That's true. And that's another thing I always tell my customers every day is everybody can be a hero one day a week, but how do you treat your customers when you have that bad day? And a lot of these other places, they'll throw a pile of parts at it or they'll do a poor repair, and then the customer's just left stranded. They're not taking care of them on the back end. They're selling them more parts to cover that they misdiagnosed it in the first place. If I misdiagnose something, I'm taking the part off, throwing it in the drawer for a good test part for the next vehicle, and I'm not charging that to the customer. Luckily, we've never had a slow time since we've opened the door. So we're right now there's 27 vehicles in the parking lot waiting to get fixed.